Welcome back. I am John P. Today we are going to be talking about Grand Seiko and how they won the watch game. That's right. In my opinion, Grand Seiko has built such a strong brand and they've done some things that are game changers. They've done them secretively and quietly under the radar, and then they pop up out of nowhere and they have a complete brand and company focused on the watch collector. I'm going to be sharing with you some things that Grand Seiko has been doing, some things in the public eye, as well as some things not in the public eye, both with their watches, their branding, their craftsmen, what they've been doing, and why this is so important and why they need to be on your radar. On the wrist today, I have a vintage Enocar Sherpa Super Dive. I love this watch. You can see more of this watch and other watches that I have on my Instagram, The Real John P, where you won't see too many Grand Seiko watches, but Grand Seiko is the next watch on my current hit list for the reasons that I am going to be sharing with you. And also, I did a video when I started this channel a few years ago talking about all the things that, in my opinion, a watch brand needs to do to be competitive in the future. I'll try to dig it up and I'll try to put it in the description below. But I had so many things that any brand should do in order to take control of the market and captivate us as watch collectors. And the reality is, out of nowhere, Grand Seiko has just kind of done these things and they've told no one, and all of a sudden, secretively, they must have been planning this, but they come out and they have everything that I mentioned. So I find that super interesting. I'll leave that in the comments below. Also, don't forget to check out delraywatch.com. So, what has Grand Seiko done? What are they doing? I think it's important to kind of consider that Grand Seiko is, technically part of Seiko, but also they are a Japanese brand, right? And there's different parts of the world and they have different cultures, right? And there's different things that the people believe. And there is one specific thing in Japanese culture. There's a Japanese proverb called the three phases. If you're familiar with this, if you're into Japanese culture or you've read about this, there's different people that study this for different reasons, but there's these three faces, and the proverb goes something like, there is a face that a person shows to everyone, there is a face that a person shows to their close friends, and there is a face that a person shows to no one, and that's the actual person that they are. And this is something that, apparently many Japanese people believe, but it's an age-old proverb. And this is something that is part of the Japanese culture. And I think if we consider this and we put this in the context of what Grand Seiko has been doing, I think it makes a lot of sense. And the first thing that Grand Seiko has been doing is they've been focusing on the quality of their products. There was a very long time where Grand Seiko was just coming out with average products, nice watches outside of the US market, but they hadn't really focused on making the watches ultra superlative or interesting in any way. Now many people find those older Grand Seikos to be interesting watches, but they're different than why people find current day Grand Seiko watches to be interesting. Everything from the Zaratsu polishing, the very interesting way, much like something that you'd see with Japanese craftsmen in something like a sword, but also the dials. Grand Seiko is known for their beautiful dials, their hammer texture dials. They're dials that are almost always supposed to be modeled after usually a piece of nature, something like a river or a lake or a mountain or the Japanese autumn. We have the heritage collection with the seasons modeled after trees, something like that. We have the birch, we have the different types of barks, we have the limited edition, the types of woods. And this is something that has become what Grand Seiko focuses on, and kind of their thing that they're known for is their beautiful dial creation. But when we put it in the context of the three faces, it's almost like Grand Seiko produces a watch for everyone at a certain point, right? They have watches that are just almost Datejust or Rolex Datejust or Oyster Perpetual competitors. They may come in automatic movements, typically automatic, but they offer a little bit of spring drive in quartz as well. We'll touch on that in a second, but they offer a watch for anyone just kind of wanting a nice watch could buy, and that's almost the face. I know this could be a stretch for some, but stick with me here because I think it makes sense for the rest of what Grand Seiko is doing. But that's kind of the face that they show everyone is, hey, we make a nice watch. But then you get a little bit deeper, right? We start talking about the face from the proverb where you only show certain things to your close friends. And those close friends, I think we could consider as watch collectors, right? What is Grand Seiko showing to the watch collectors? Not only are they showing the beautiful dials, you flip it over, they also pay very close attention to the movements, and that's something that us as watch collectors in the watch collecting community always like to focus on, right? So when Grand Seiko comes out with the 9SA5 movement, which has a horizontal gear train, which also allows the movement to be about 15% slimmer than the previous mechanical movement that they were offering, the automatic movement prior, this is something that's not only a nod to watch collectors, it's a very direct, blunt, and to the point statement that we want watch collectors, we want watch enthusiasts, we're here for you as well, the close friend's face in the Japanese proverb. But then, if we go a little bit further and we look at some of the other things that the brand has been doing, some of the things that I've always talked about that watch brands need to do to solidify themselves in not only the watch collecting community, but also watches going into the future, considering the increase in popularity. They have the third face that we'll kind of put into this context, the face that you only show to themselves. And this, in my opinion, is the things that Grand Seiko is doing behind the scenes. Now, Grand Seiko just, at the time of the shooting, Grand Seiko just released another new watch. Grand Seiko doesn't put out press releases and say, we're coming out with a new watch in 6 months, we're changing the company in 6 months. Go to Watch Pro, the website, or go to some of the other news websites, you know what they are, and you'll see endless Swiss brands and German brands saying, we're going to have this partnership into the future. We are going to do this. We are going to do XYZ. This model will come out. Grand Seiko does not do that. They tell you when it comes out, and that's when you know. It's always a sure thing. Grand Seiko says, today this new watch model comes out, and we're very pleased and excited to share this with you. Whereas something like, I don't know, an IWC just kind of says, well, we have this partnership that's coming into the future. No, Grand Seiko doesn't do that. They have the third face. They keep certain things to themselves. They work on it. And when they come out with it, it's a very effortless kind of release where it looks like they're kind of just doing these things nonchalant, but it's not the case because Grand Seiko has expert master craftsmen, including their micro artist studio that have professionals, everything from the decorations on the movements to their masterpiece series, talking about watches that retail for over $100,000 because everything is finely made by hand with hand tools and under certain circumstances, or finely sought after or difficult to obtain gems that are set in some of the dials. So Grand Seiko has all of this, and they're all working behind the scenes tirelessly. And I know through authorized dealer network friends, as well as some chatter in the industry, that there are actually people behind the scenes that are working tirelessly to build out not only the marketing of Grand Seiko, but also just the authorized dealer and distribution channels. And it's almost like it just kind of popped up and they didn't tell anyone. And overnight, everyone on YouTube is talking about Grand Seiko, not only because they're popular, but also because of the quality and all these things that kind of just happened, right? When the new Grand Seiko movement came out, it just came out. And they had been working on that technology for who knows how long, perhaps several years or maybe even longer, and then it comes out and that's that. So I want to make that very clear is Grand Seiko has done that. Now, something that I also don't even see a press release on, and I think this really solidifies and cements their place in the watch community into the future, is Grand Seiko just launched essentially, at least it appears, I haven't seen any press releases, but you go to the website, Grand Seiko has an online boutique with all of their watches seemingly in stock, right? And that's something that I've always said, you need to have this. You need to have this. Brands need to be able to sell their watches online. Think of what happened with the pandemic. Think of what happens with people buying things online. Think of controlling the way that watches are sold, bought, and distributed, and the customer experience. Think of that, and that's something that other brands have slowly done, but they don't really have it to this extreme. But you go to the Grand Seiko website, and all of their watches are available online for sale, and it just happened. They just did it. They didn't say, we're investing in e-commerce. In a year from now, people will be able to check out. You can just check out. And that's kind of the third face that I see with Grand Seiko is they do what they do. They don't tell anyone. They stay in their lane. They don't make alternatives to other brands. They do what they do. They have their story, their narrative. They don't deviate from that. And they do things when they do them And that is so interesting to see in kind of a community where people bounce off and they do the integrated bracelets and they borrow from the designs. Grand Seiko doesn't do that. They just do what they do. And touching on that, they also announced a trade-in program. This is something I've been talking about, but it's very important for brands to be able to take in on the trades, especially if you're going to kind of circumvent, which is probably not the best word, but that's what's happening. The brands are going around the authorized dealers so they can protect the secondhand prices of the watches, which, by the way, Grand Seiko secondhand prices are some of the highest and have some of the smallest difference between retail price and secondhand price out there on the market for brands, with the exception of Rolex and Patek Philippe, which is amazing for a brand that's only been in the US market for a short time. But they have this trade-in program where you can trade in a watch. They'll give you a value. Sure, they send it to their dealers and they don't refurbish it and sell it themselves, but they have it. So someone could walk into an authorized dealer or directly through the online boutique, trade in their Grand Seiko watch, or apparently any other watch. I have yet to hear experience about this, and get the Grand Seiko watch that you want. And as someone that's a watch dealer, handles a lot of trades, handles a lot of business, that kind of has me thinking about that. But I'm actually very excited for the brand to do that, because it's something that I know that they should do and they need to do, because we as watch collectors, we like different watches. We like trading in, trading out. I work with so many people. So I know that this is kind of where the industry is going. And when you connect the quality, the dedication, the interesting dials, the movements, the three faces, when you put all this together, I just don't see anything that Grand Seiko is missing other than the solid branding that would carry out to casual buyers. But I think if they have enough time and enough time passes and they get enough publicity and enough people talk about it, I don't see why they can't be one of the top brands for luxury watches in the United States. If people do, now that we have more of an international world, international trade, e-commerce, branch out away from the Swiss brands, I don't see Grand Seiko losing certainly the attention of watch collectors and geeks and savants, but also they just must start gaining the attention of others because of all these things. But what do you think about Grand Seiko? I know I'm sharing a lot of positive things about the brand. There are going to be some people out there that say, hey, maybe the branding hasn't quite caught up. I'd rather buy the Rolex. I understand that. Different things for different people. But I really do think that Grand Seiko is doing not only a great job from a business perspective, but also from the watch perspectives. We get their watches in at Delray Watch, and they make really great watches. What do you think? Let me know your thoughts on Grand Seiko in the comments below. I'd love to see it and hear it. Please do not forget to check out DelrayWatch.com, where I think we may have a few Grand Seiko, but we have, quite literally every other brand as well. And please check me out on Instagram, The Real John P. Thanks, guys. You've been chatting with John P. Ciao.